We're going to get this party started here, talking about FIHPP. Woo! Get excited to wait for another year. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. I don't know if Francis is in the room, but I just want to appreciate his renaming of the program to the Foreclosure Intervention Housing Prevention Program, because that's sometimes what it feels like when we're waiting this long. So thank you, Francis, wherever you are. And without further ado, we are going to start with introductions. So I'm Risa Keeper from Community Vision. Very nice to meet you all. We are a local CDFI serving 46 counties. I'm looking at Ruby. 46 counties from Bakersfield to the Oregon border. So Northern and Central California. We've been around for 37 years. We have a $120 million loan fund. We do new markets tax credits and about a 15-year-old consulting practice providing real estate and financial management technical assistance to some of you probably in the audience over the years, and many other community development corporations, nonprofits, and small businesses. And we're here today on behalf of the FIHPP team, Ruby, who will share more about the technical assistance coming with the FIHPP program, and Elizabeth, who will share more about the capital coming from the FIHPP program. And Community Vision will be participating in FIHPP as an implementing fund manager, so delivering and deploying capital and potentially providing technical assistance as well. So I'm going to be interviewing these two incredible women, and I will hand off the mic over to, which one of you wants to go first? Elizabeth.
Hi, just for intros, right? Yeah. Elizabeth Wampler. I'm the Deputy Director of LISC Bay Area. So we are the Bay Area office of the national organization LISC. Let's see. We've been around for about 40 years in the Bay Area and nationally. We do lending to nonprofits. If you're interested in our lending to CLTs, my colleague Sally is in a session at 11. Go check that out. And we do capacity building, and we are going to be administering the FIHPP program. So we'll be talking more about that.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I am Ruby Harris. I'm Senior Director with Enterprise Community Partners. Like my colleagues, the organization is about 40 years old. We are a national organization. We serve 14 different markets, but have loans and capacity building programs throughout all of the states and U.S. places and spaces. And I work out of our LA office, and I'm based out of my home office in Long Beach. And I work primarily with potential borrowers and sponsors to figure out what kind of capital will work best for them. And then also as a partner in figuring out like what else needs to come to the marketplace and creating those resources as much as we can. So I'll share more about our role in FIHPP too in a little bit.
He's going to help us, but I could just, I know what slide's coming next. And it's already been said, but I'll just repeat it. Oh, here we go. Yay. So just a quick I'm going to give a few program basics as like a background, and then we'll dig in on more specifics. So a couple of pieces of legislation that sort of provided the early background and context for FIHPP, the Foreclosure Intervention Housing Preservation Program. Senate Bill 1079, which was mentioned earlier, gives post-foreclosure auction purchase opportunities to tenants, and this would be for 1 to 4 unit properties. So you have 45 days after foreclosure to match the purchase price. And I believe this is for nonprofits and land trusts, which are nonprofits, and probably some of those other legal entities, which we'll get into later. So that happened in the fall of 2020. And then soon on the heels of that, Assembly Bill 140 was the one that contained the FIHPP allocation of the original $500 million. And this is funding to support the purchase, acquisition, rehab, and stabilization of 1 to 25 unit properties. And this is also has this foreclosure element. So It's meant to work in tandem with 1079. So helping folks enact 1079 to purchase these properties in that 45-day period. But it's not limited to that. You can also use FIHPP funding to purchase properties that are, in air quotes, at risk of foreclosure, which we'll get into more. There's a broader definition of that. And a few, okay, so here's a little bit, and then Elizabeth, you're going to go into this more, but some of the at risk of foreclosure definitions that we've been thinking about and the guidelines specify are around mortgage defaults and delinquencies, bankruptcy of the owner, tenant initiated litigation that could be based on like the property being uninhabitable or could be other reasons. Post foreclosure auction we talked about, and then just in general, if the building is violating any sort of building codes with the local municipality, any permitting issues. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. And then for qualifying entities, so FIHPP is going to look for what we're calling QNPs, so qualified nonprofit partners. Help me out. QNPs. Oh, really? Okay, ES. Never mind. Eligible sponsors. And these can be nonprofits, obviously CLTs, limited equity housing cooperatives or subsidiaries, local governments, but the primary purpose has to be the development and preservation and operation and management of housing. And then affordability, there's a 55-year restriction for multifamily. What's not on here is for single family, which is eligible in this program, the affordability is 30 years. And then in terms of the product, so this will likely come out as majority grants, but there's a possibility that there could be some loans. The interest would be at or below 3%. And then the uses can be site specific, so AC rehab, but also not site specific, so pre-dev, developer fee, project management fee, and then the COSR, which is the capitalized operating subsidy reserve, which allows for up to $175,000 per unit over 20 years, through acquisition, rehab, and stabilization. And this is for multifamily properties only that are operating at 50% or less of AMI and showing deficits. This is for general support to get the program back into the black. And then maximums $500K per unit on multifamily properties, $600K for single family, and total investment can go up to $10 million per project, which includes everything, including the COSR and the non-site specific fees. And then AMIs, there's a broad range, so extremely low up to moderate, but no more than 25% can be moderate. So this really is focused on the lower income AMIs. And then the fund structure, HCD is the state agency who, put out the RFP, is allocating these funds. That goes to an administering fund manager, which is LISC, and Elizabeth will talk more about that, which then gets into contract with IFMs, implementing fund managers, of which Community Vision will be one, and there are a number of others. And then the IFMs work directly with the borrower grantee, the not QNPs anymore. Tell me one more time. Eligible sponsors, which are all of you potentially. So those of you in the room today that are interested in taking advantage of FIHPP, you will be looking to work with an IFM. So you won't have a direct relationship with the AFM in most cases. You'll be working with a local CDFI on the capital team. And then geographic distribution. So in the guidelines, it specifies that 45% of funds should be aimed to be invested in Southern California. And I think that's Kern and below, but if you know differently, please correct me. Kern County and below. NorCal would be 30% and rural 20%. So, with rural, there could be some overlapping interpretations, and this is just like a general guidepost. There's a little bit of flexibility if there are specific high impact reasons why we need to sort of divert from these numbers, but this is the general goal. And then Just a quick note about budget updates, and we'll get into this a little bit more later in this session, but just in this most recent budget cycle, the program had $15 million cut. So it started as a $500 million program. Now it's $485 million. That $485 million funds the technical assistance, funds HCD's costs, funds the AFM's costs, and the IFM's costs, as well as all of the projects. So, you know, we're all here to try to do our best to preserve the remaining 485 and make sure that no more money gets cut out of this. But we all need to take part in that. That needs to be a collective action. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. The first designation of funds has been encumbered, 239,875. That happened in July. So the remaining 245 million is what we'll be wanting to really work to protect over the next budget cycle, which starts in January, and the one after that. And funds are first come, first serve. So it's great that we're here today, and all of the programs that are out there, you know, getting put in place to support you all to take advantage of this. Please engage if you think you might want to participate, because these funds would, you know, could go out really fast, and we don't know what's going to happen in future budget cycles. So with that, I will pass it over to Elizabeth.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the kind of fund management team and our role and how capital deployment will work. And it's going to be pretty high level because we're not in contract with the state yet. But I'll also share like a timeline and things like that. Before I get into it, I did just want to say too, like, especially when I was here yesterday and then being here this morning, like really feeling the responsibility of doing this program right. Like you all, like everybody here, folks who aren't here, like did incredible work to make this a thing that exists. And so I feel it. I know everybody on our team feels it, and really wants to do our best. And we know you're going to hold us accountable. So thank you in advance for that. All right. So our team, oh, next slide. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to start with who our team is. So LISC is the administering fund manager, and then we're working with this incredible team of CDFIs across California and nationally who will be implementing the program. So that includes my amazing colleagues here from Community Vision and Enterprise. It includes Genesis LA, it includes RCAC, who focus in rural areas, and the San Francisco Housing Accelerator Fund. And I'm from the LISC Bay Area office, but we also have our LISC LA, LISC Rural, LISC San Diego folks. So we have a lot of like really strong geographic coverage. And then I was going to add a little bit more to what Risa shared around kind of how you'll interact with us. So oh, you're good. So yeah, if you're focused on projects and you want capital, most likely you might not ever really work directly with LISC. You'll be working with all of the other CDFIs. But if you're really tracking the program success, program impact, things like that, like LISC will be leading those functions, like in a lot of collaboration with everyone else. So feel free to get in touch about that. So yeah, let's go to the timeline slide. So subject to change. This is our like estimated timeline for when we will actually be able to start accepting applications from folks who want to qualify to be an eligible sponsor, and then when we'll be able to accept applications for capital. It starts with when we received the award letter back in July, and then estimated about 6 months to get into contract with HCD. So we're in the middle of that now. If we do it faster, we will start program implementation more quickly. But I think we're still on track to have an executed contract end of this year, early next year. If that changes, if it happens more quickly, or if it slips, we'll communicate that. But that's our hope for now. And then we'll have about 6 months where we will frantically do a lot of program stand-up. And I'm happy to talk more about that, like what will be involved in that. A couple of things are on this slide, like we have to get into subcontract with all our IFM partners. We have to develop a lot of materials. The guidelines are a starting point, but we will have application materials. We will have like really concrete processes on how to evaluate those applications so that we have consistency across all of our partners. And we're going to be developing a regulatory agreement for this program. So like lots of fun happening in a relatively short timeline. And if I haven't already reached out to you, I might be to get feedback or advice or help on some of those items or other folks on our team. So yeah, we're hoping late spring, early summer to be able to kind of open the gates for eligible sponsor applications. And then a couple of months after that to be able to open for applications for funding. And this is very high level, kind of what that process might look like. So the first step, you have to be qualified to be an eligible sponsor in order to apply for capital. So we're going to have like an online portal, and also will be available if you want to talk in person. Oh, I'm doing a bad job of saying next slide. Thank you. Sorry, it's like I can see it here, and so I forget there's a big screen. Yeah, so hoping to have an online portal, so it'll be a really easy application to fill out. Probably will have to upload a lot of organizational documents. You'll be assigned to one of the IFM partners, like mainly by geography. And then if you meet the eligibility criteria, which is laid out in the guidelines, we can get more into that if that's a question. You'll be able to apply for funding as soon as that's ready. And if not, like you'll be able to go to the TA team and potentially get some help to get qualified. Once you're able to apply for capital funding or any kind of funding, pre-development funding and capital is available. You can do that. At that point, you can choose which IFM, which CDFI you want to work with. It was one of our big values to really let folks on the ground decide who they want to work with based on pre-existing relationships, a relationship that you want to build. Then the IFM will work with you to assess your project, both for project eligibility, right? This is the foreclosure intervention and housing preservation program. So it's not every single project that's eligible, and we can talk more about that. Risa went through that. And also to really start working together to build the project budget and like do all of the studies that will be needed in order to kind of fill in those details. So I'm going to stop there. We can just skip through the rest of these slides. Happy to go into them more if there's questions.
All right, so I am going to talk about the FIHPP program that it goes along with the capital program, and the goal is to help everyone get ready to become both an eligible sponsor and to help their project get through the process. Next slide, please. Yes. So there are going to be 7 different types of technical assistance that roll alongside the capital team. Oh, what I should mention too is there's $10 million available of technical assistance that's going to be rolling out over the first 3 years of the program. And the types of technical assistance are on this slide. There's lots of detail here. Don't feel like you need to read it all. We'll give you copies of this later, but I'll give you the highlights here. So the first one is one-on-one TA, really working directly, having the sponsors, all of the FIHPP sponsors get linked up with a consultant who can help you work through whatever piece of sort of FIHPP eligibility or project eligibility that folks might need help with. And that includes, you know, developing budgets, developing a business plan, working through your scope of work, figuring out if the costs seem like costs that are fair. Planning for cooperative ownership models. There's going to be a lot of different TA that is provided through this program. The second one is toolkits and templates. We'll have a resource center available on a website where people can go online and just pull down any kind of templates and toolkits that would help you to become, sorry, something popped up on my screen, to fulfill the requirements of FIHPP eligibility. The third one is webinars. So doing a lot of peer education about FIHPP, and then more broadly property acquisition of this property type, small properties. The fourth one is facilitating partnerships. So there will be, the whole TA team will really be working together with organizations who are not quite ready to apply for FIHPP on their own, and help them link up with more experienced developers in order to form a partnership. fifth one is prevailing wage guidance. We expect that prevailing wage will apply to most of our units. And so that is something that is sometimes new territory for the groups that will be looking to use FIHPP. And so we will be helping them, set up their systems and understand what the prevailing wage requirements are. The sixth one is property assessment, due diligence, sort of thinking about whether or not the property is the right property to pick up. And then the seventh one is a searchable database. So having a database where FIHPP eligible sponsors can go online and find units that would meet the qualifications of the FIHPP program. So pretty large, pretty extensive number of TA supports that will be in place. The TA timeline is actually really closely aligned with capital, which is great. Right now, as we speak, the TA teams are putting together applications to the state to become the TA providers for the FIHPP program. Enterprise is involved in one of those applications and hopeful that our team will be part of this effort. That is due in November. December, we'll find out, and HCD will make a public announcement about who the which TA team was selected. And then it's sort of the gates are open for us to start the same process with contracting with the state, contracting with all of our TA providers, and moving forward towards getting TA launched towards the end of the summer or early fall. So that the end of the summer or early fall is a year from now. So we want to also mention like what we can do in the meantime for all of us to get ready, because there's a lot of resources already out there. There was a bunch that were just mentioned earlier in the session before this that are definitely part of that landscape. So the best thing to do today, if you are interested in FIHPP, but the TA is not here yet, is to start out by reviewing the FIHPP guidelines to really understand what the eligibility is going to look like. They have not all of the details like Elizabeth mentioned, but a lot of sort of the core details about what a project needs to look like and what an eligible sponsor needs to have under their belt in order to qualify. So reviewing that is important. I put a link on here. Again, I'll share this slide, but you can, Google FIHPP on HCD's website and you'll find them. The second thing is fostering partnerships. This should be done now. It should be done way ahead of time. Really starting to talk to, if you know that you're not going to qualify, once you read those guidelines, start to talk to more experienced developers, find somebody who's mission aligned with you in the geography that you want to serve, and then start, talking through like, what does a partnership look like? What would the roles be? How would we share any kind of developer fee that comes out of these projects? And then we have a partnerships toolkit, which Francis talked about earlier, that we developed under Preservation Next, which is one of Enterprise's TA sort of efforts in this space, that you can also use just to get you started on those conversations. The third thing here is clearly identifying your geography, even down to the neighborhood, if that's how specific you want to be. And start identifying properties. So one of the things with all these properties is that they're going to have to move really, really fast. So the pipeline is important. So building your pipeline over this next year is important. And I've worked with a lot of sort of small AC rehab deals, and it's about like tenant working with the tenants, understanding what the needs might be, help like figuring out if there's any code enforcement issues that might be going on in a building, to try to start identifying now which landlord you might want to be talking to later. The fourth thing is prepping your organization. So board engagement, your board training, making sure they're ready for FIHPP, that they know what you're trying to accomplish through FIHPP. Because like I said, everything's going to move really fast once it gets started. Training staff. There's a bunch of property management, asset management, project management, right? Training resources out there to start working on, especially if your staff is new to housing. Business and strategic planning. And then updating your accounting systems. I mentioned this because I think a lot of people may forget about it. And we've just seen that sometimes organizations who are getting started, like the accounting system under a housing program is a little bit different than other types of accounting. And so it's something that comes up a lot in my work with developers. Okay, tons of information on this slide. I just want to point out that there's a bunch of webinars and toolkits already out there. We talked about this bullet point number 2, or just in the session before, the California CLT networks, they have technical assistance available for everyone in resource library. So please check them out. Community Vision and Genesis LA also have real estate consulting, and the CalCore program, the California Community Owned Real Estate Program. So I put a link here for Community Vision's real estate consulting practice, and they have a robust resource library as well. And then CalCore is a cohort-based training program. They're on their 3rd cohort right now, but it is 100% dedicated to community ownership of community assets and serves a lot of community land trusts across the state. So another really good sort of way to link in. And then the first bullet point is Enterprise's Preservation Next program. We just wrapped up a 1-year academy here in California. So we have 11 recorded sessions that are all dedicated to ACRE small preservation on our website right now that you can access, and then tools that go along with each of those webinars. We also did a summer FIHPP series specifically for FIHPP. So you can find those also on our website. We have the partnerships one that we did with the California CLT network, business and sustainability planning, which we completed with Community Vision. And then coming up in November, we're going to have a webinar on asset management, which we're doing with Strata Ventures. So again, all of those come with both recorded webinars and toolkits for you to download. And then finally, we have a Preservation Next toolkit, which is a national toolkit. But so there is specific market information, and you can actually do a drop down, pick which market you live in, Northern California, Southern California, or anywhere else in the country, and then be able to see sort of what resources are already out there, what policies are already in place where you're doing work. And then you can, there's case studies there, there's performas, there's lots of good information there as well. And then I want to mention just a couple of other things that are coming up funding wise. So we are heavily involved with the Community Anti-Displacement and Preservation Program. That is another $5 million that we hope to get passed in the next year or 2. It's taking a little while because of the budget stuff. But CAP is what's important about it is that it is not just foreclosed properties. This is for all property acquisitions over 5 units in California. That is a 2-year bill. It's right now at Assembly Appropriations Committee, and we are planning to move CAP forward in the legislative and budget session coming up, so early this year. So please contact us to get looped into that. Lots of advocacy happening right now. And then lastly, I just want to mention the Affordable Housing Bond Act of 2024, which is potentially going to generate $10 billion for affordable housing in the state of California. And it includes $1.5 billion for preservation, which includes ACRE small. So all kinds of preservation are included in that. But wanted to mention that the timeline on that is it would get passed in July of 2024. To make it to the November ballot, and then we would all have the responsibility to vote for it. So I wanted to mention those couple of things that are additive to what FIHPP is doing.
Thank you. I'm wondering, could we turn off the projector now, since we're going to move into conversation? That would be amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Ruby. Tons of information. Definitely look for all of those links and slides coming at you later. Elizabeth, you mentioned a thank you to everyone in the audience for, early advocacy and continued advocacy on this. I also want to, give a quick shout out to everyone on in these organizations that you saw up here that, like, I know we've been working on this program since 2021 and a lot of other people have been working on it since a long time before that. And there's just a ton of people working on this and no one's in contract. So just want to give a quick shout out to everyone who's been putting in the hours to make this happen. Yeah, thank you. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, I promise. Hopefully it's a $485 million light. Okay, so with that, I know we talked a little bit about the timing gap. Like there's a lot of stuff happening now. It's a little bit of hurry up and wait, but we're not actually going to see funds and TA really start to get out there into the community until next summer. So we're moving into a little bit of a conversation here, and then we'll open it up for questions. But I'd just love to hear, just from your perspectives, having been in the space for a really long time, what do you think we could all be doing? I know you guys, you're working on an application, so you can't be doing any more right now, but, but let's say, like, you know, after December, right? And there's this little bit of a gap, like what can we all be doing? So there's a lot of folks that are working to make this happen. There's philanthropic partners, the public sector, there's community groups on the ground, there's intermediaries like us. Like what are the most productive conversations? Like how can we all be working together to keep this moving fast and to keep this money, you know, appropriated to FIHPP? So Elizabeth, I'll hand it over to you first.
Yeah, a couple of things. So Ruby mentioned the importance of getting your pipeline ready so you could apply. The budget cycle conversations for the next year are going to start before we are open for capital applications. So we won't have funded a project while those conversations are going on. So evidence that there is a strong pipeline, that there is demand, that this money is going to move quickly, and that we need to appropriate the dollars that are planned would be great. I know the California CLT network is thinking about that. LISC is thinking about that. And now is actually a good time to start talking to folks in Sacramento about that, kind of lay the groundwork if need be. So we're thinking about that. And, you know, happy to partner or happy to just kind of be in conversation about that. Maybe I'll just like leave it there for now, see if there's anything you want to.
Maybe I'll answer in a slightly different direction to add to that. Is that I see FIHPP as like one piece to a larger preservation sort of movement that is happening right now, which is why I really wanted to mention the other types of funding that are coming down the pike too. A lot of the cities and counties are also working on, you know, AC rehab programs. And so I feel like doing some of that advocacy work locally and continuing to push people to include preservation in their plans and not to pit preservation and production against each other is really important. In Southern California, we're hosting a symposium next week, actually, for preservation folks to get together, including philanthropy, including government, including developers, to start having that sort of cohesion and talking through what do we need, what are the policy recommendations, what's working in other cities or regions that we should be implementing here in Southern California. So I think, you know, those kind of conversations are going to continue to help sort of build this momentum that's been going for 10-ish years now in California. Yeah, we're really getting there and it's exciting.
Can I add something else? Just building on that. There like the TOPA campaigns that are going on that like have been really hard fights, like want to like really appreciate everyone who is like in the middle of that, or yeah. Or has, you know, had a defeat, but is going to come back. One, you know, the FIHPP program funds projects that someone is willing to sell, for the most part, except for the 1079 projects, which are the ones that go to auction and there's a right of first refusal, which Steve talked about in the earlier session. But most of them like are going to have to be up for sale. And so TOPA still is going to be a really important piece for FIHPP and for the ecosystem generally. So support those, like, and yeah, I don't know, funders, if you're in the room, fund those.
Thank you. It's great to hear more about the ecosystem and just be reminded that preservation and production need to both be happening in larger quantities each to be able to meet the housing need that we have here in California. So that's macro view. Let's bring it back to micro for a minute, and then we'll open it up for audience questions. So get those questions ready. So this slide deck had some pointers on what you can be doing to think about getting ready within your organizations. And, you know, some of them are as specific as looking at your accounting systems, starting conversations with your board so that, you know, when the fire hose of FIHPP opens up, you know, you don't have to spend another 3 months, you know, getting everyone on the same page about it. Other things that were mentioned were like starting to think about the properties in your area that, you know, you might want to start targeting. Elizabeth, I'll go to you first. Anything else that comes to mind just based on your experience around those things that might get missed in, you know, the early planning process of like, what can we be doing organizationally right now before we have the money to actually move, to just be best positioning ourselves to be fast and furious and streamlined and ready as soon as that application opens up?
Yeah. I think getting really clear on how FIHPP fits into your organization's model. So both your business model, but also how you interact with tenants, how you identify properties, and then figuring out kind of what your process will look like, right? Like it's going to be different for different organizations. You know, some folks are really going to start with like, tenants have come to us from this building. Like, is it eligible for a FIHPP? Can we make it work? How do we make it work? Are there different strategies that we could make it work? So getting clear on kind of that. Others may be like looking to see like what properties qualify, starting there, and then like getting engaged with tenants after you've identified some likely ones. So the more you know now about how you'll approach that, and could potentially start conversations with tenants, or at least kind of like think through your like order of operations, I think is going to be really, really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, so another thing that comes to mind for me is identifying who your partners will be. One that I think will be really big, and we're gonna on the TA team try to help with this, is identifying the right general contractor who will be working on your project. Sort of those types of you know, folks that are going to be working on your project in one way or another, like making sure that they're in place, that they know that this is coming, and having a rapport with them up front, because it has been our experience that in the smaller properties, which it won't be a surprise to any of you, that it's been difficult to get at cost for small properties, sort of all of those folks, relocation experts, the general contractors, any kind of subcontractors that you're going direct towards. I think that would be really important too.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to add one more thing, which is like, think about your cash flow. You know, this is going to be designed to support non-site specific costs. So like early pre-development fees, but it always helps in these scenarios. Like if you have a reserve, I know not all of you are in that position, but if you do, and it maybe has a board designated use, perhaps now's a good time to start talking about your board, talking with your board about, you know, releasing some of those to set aside for bridges for this program, because we know things are going to come up that we're not anticipating, even though there's a really experienced team on both sides, TA and capital, leading this work. Like we can never predict what's going to happen. It's always great to have a little bit of an extra cash reserve to help like things keep moving smoothly. If you're in a position to look at some working capital, you know, it might be a good opportunity to start thinking about that within your organization and looking into options for that. Okay, anything else to add at this moment before we turn it over to the audience? No? Okay. So now we're going to open it up for questions from you all. And I am going to step down. So let me know who, yes, I see there, and then I'm going to come to you next. Oh, perfect.
Thanks. I'm just wondering about the process with the state once an applicant is funded. You said you're working in the first part of 2024 on like regulatory agreement, and is the idea that the state is handing off that kind of process are they doing a standard agreement with each of these? And are you working to get all of those loan docs kind of cleared so that it can happen fast? Because that could be a pinch point, or the other way around.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It's one of the reasons the state has farmed this program out to a team of CDFIs rather than doing it themselves. And it really does feel like a bit of an experiment. But so yes, we will be developing use agreement, regulatory agreement, loan docs, grant docs, kind of everything that we think will possibly be needed during that program stand-up period. A big priority is to make sure that they work for folks who plan to transition properties into ownership, if not immediately in the like longer term or medium term. And the state will review all of that and approve it so that when we're actually doing the transaction work, it can just happen. Like it doesn't have to go back to the state.
And I think it'll still be to be worked out exactly how, but it's possible that you'll close with your IFM as the initial lien holder and regulatory sort of agency, and then that would transfer over to the AFM, but the HC, you wouldn't be working with HCD directly as, somewhat an agency regulating or monitoring affordability, at least through the 55-year period. Yeah, which could help. Yeah. Okay. There was a question here. Yes.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for the presentation. We do need the slides. It's a lot of information and so little time, but it's much appreciated. I know that you guys offer trainings, right? Work a series of trainings to already studying CLTs, but there's also new upcoming CLTs who are potentially not going to be ready for this. Are you guys going to offer any support? And for example, maybe some of the CLTs won't qualify for the TA support, but is there a proactive plan to continue developing and making this accessible to them as well in this process?
Yeah, so the TA support will be available to everyone, including more nascent sort of organizations who are just getting going. They may be like volunteer led or whatever. And so we do have a plan for being able to also sort of meet them where they are. And the thought is that that there will be like a number of webinars and all the tools that somebody will be assigned into helping sort of them navigate that piece. The one-on-one TA, that's going to be on a case-by-case basis, whether those organizations are going to have access exactly to the one-on-one TA, but the rest of the TA program will be completely available to them. And the reason for that is the one-on-one TA is really trying to get the pipeline moving and making sure that those projects that are possible are going to get to the finish line. We want to get everybody through that process as much as we can.
And just on that note, Ruby, Elizabeth, could one or both of you touch on the experience piece of this? Because I know that there was a lot of work and advocacy done to push that down as much as everyone was comfortable with, to make this program as accessible as possible to newer CLTs and organizations.
I'll start. Can add it. Yeah, and there's a slide that has a little bit more information when we share that with you. Yeah, I like the way I've kind of been thinking about the experience requirements is that they're significant, but they're not like impossible. So it requires 2 years of experience for the organization. And there's a lot of, and then a series of kind of experience on property management, asset management, project management. There's a couple of other bullets. But that experience can be met by the organization. It can be met by staff on the organization. So if you have somebody who worked at another housing organization and comes with that experience, that can help meet that. And it can also be met through, through consultants, that's right. Which the pre-acquisition kind of pre-development money can help pay for. And it can be met by joint venture partnership. So there's a lot of ways to kind of put together a team of folks who can check those boxes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that the partnerships piece of that that's why sort of I think for groups that know they're not going to qualify under that list of qualifications is to start working on what your partnerships look like. And the TA is meant to also help to help like connect people to the right resources so that they can meet those minimum requirements too.
I don't know if there's like a special secret partnership roundtable happening later today, but you're all here together. So if you know, if you know that one of your co-CLTs here has more experience than you and you want to approach them, now's a great opportunity. Okay, more question. I see, sorry, I didn't get the order, but I see all the way kind of in the back against the wall and then a hand here, and then we'll go down to the front row.
Thank you for the presentation. I think I have two comments. The first is, to the extent you're developing regulatory agreements and all of those documents, we have the CLT network here. And of course, there are somewhat different regulatory frameworks that apply to CLTs. So to the extent as you're developing those, you can think of this group in mind as well, and the Fannie Mae riders and all that stuff that has to go with it. That would be appreciated. And the second one is a question. So a lot of the FIHPP properties are a universe of distressed properties, right? It's, notice of default, tax delinquencies. And so as groups are getting ready to think about specific projects, like how do you recommend that we develop a pipeline for what properties can be in line when the money is available?
Yeah, so there's and I don't think we have a slide that goes through this, but there's a list that HCD actually has designed and developed of potential markers for what a FIHPP eligible property might look like, at risk of foreclosure might look like. So one is code enforcement issues, one is like tax delinquencies, one is active foreclosure. So there's some kind of default on record. What am I missing? There was a long list.
There is a slide. But yeah, those are all true if a tenant or group of tenants has active litigation against a project, that qualifies it. And then there's some actions that local government can take. So code violations, deeming a property uninhabitable, or deeming it at risk of foreclosure. And then probably a few more.
Yeah. And so I would recommend that, so sort of getting ready for that then is, it's a process of understanding your city, the building department at your city, sort of having a strong understanding of any, like what the process is for code violations. I was having a good conversation, Richard, the other day around like what about tenant rights advocates, sort of working with those organizations who have active litigation against sort of landlords as ways to identify properties. And so it requires a little bit of creativity and being very strongly sort of connected into how your city works in order to get that. And then the default information is all, recorded and publicly available. And so again, you can get that information from your cities, and then you can also probably pull it from a broker, get somebody else who is connected to the MLS and other types of property information databases. But part of what the TA is going to do is create a database just for FIHPP sponsors. So you can also pull up as much as you can there.
Can I respond to the first comment really fast, just briefly?
Yes.
Yes, if you have had a regulatory agreement from a public agency, most likely that you were like, this is great, every agency should use this, email me, please, and send it to me. I've gotten samples from a lot of folks. I've got one from the LA pilot program, LA County pilot program, and some of the Bay Area programs that are active, but would love to have like the best model there is as a starting point.
And building off of that, really anything that you've experienced that's very specific to CLTs that you feel you're anticipating might come up as this program is getting rolled out, we want to know all of it. So thank you in advance. Okay, I think the next question was here by the aisle.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you guys so much for the presentation. As you know, someone who is involved in writing the legislation, it's amazing seeing it come to life. My question is, Ruby, you brought up the prevailing wage issue, and that was actually a really important discussion during the legislative process, is how do we work with and, you know, really provide a community-centered, locality-centered workforce development and kind of business development approach to help the small, largely BIPOC contractors that have the active experience with doing small scale ACK rehab construction in smaller jurisdictions in the sort of single and small multifamily space, and largely traditional affordable housing prevailing wage regs are not those businesses' friends. So has there been any conversation of like, is there a way to bring some of that TA into supporting those businesses who are really actually in many cases our residents and our community?
I'll be honest with you. We've had a ton of conversations about prevailing wage as we're getting ready for this TA application. Because part of the application is to describe what that program area will look like. And there were a ton of people who have not cracked that nut yet. And so I think that that's going to be a big one that we're going to have to keep working towards. But I don't have a strong sort of like way that we can we're programmatically going to address it quite yet. I do have sort of TA partners who have done trainings before, who can do one-on-one sort of prevailing wage support, both to the developer and to the contractor. And then we have strong construction managers who work alongside, you know, general contractors who can help with the connectivity in that space. But I agree with you. I think that's something that is largely missing for the small properties, the small ACK rehab properties, because those statutes are really written for big LIHTC deals, you know, like large scale, big contractors who are used to doing this every day. Yeah, so sorry I don't have like a better answer quite yet, but we are having conversations for sure.
And I can just add a quick note to that. One of the things that you pay into when you're paying prevailing wage is called the apprenticeship fee. And it's like, I don't know, 50 cents or something like that per hourly rate per person that you're paying. And I've been doing some research this summer around what those apprenticeship programs are. And they're all pretty much local community-based workforce development programs. And I had a chance to go on a tour of a training facility out in the East Bay, which was new for me and very interesting. And so I have a list, and I've been like building this list of those workforce development programs that are benefited like through this, what's it called? Apprentice program fee. So I think there are ways to connect it. But to Ruby's point, it's not as direct as like being able to just, you know, help those small providers, you know, be able to afford these higher rates. And I think that's one of the biggest issues. I think we had a question down here near the front, and then I see a hand in the back. Oh, and one here. So we'll go front, up, and down, and we have like, we're still good for another 7 minutes or so, something like that.
I have a lot of questions, but
Can you just choose one
I
for
will-
now?
well, I
You
just-
can come up later after
okay,
the session.
I just want to say just on this last point on prevailing wage, I'm wondering, Ruby, based upon what you just mentioned, that it's more geared for the larger projects. I'm wondering if maybe there might be some legislation to, you know, identify smaller projects, because as you know, we've experienced like trying to make the small projects fit into the template of the larger project just doesn't work. So I think that's important. One thing I think The most important one I think I wanted to ask is, what about tax default? Properties that are going to tax, there is equal to foreclosure as anything else. So it's not necessarily named in the legislation. How will that be eligible?
I think I want to like double check that if a property has 2 or more tax delinquencies, it's like fully FIHPP eligible. So
And it'll show up on the public record. So, for any of you who can get access to title and run those title reports, you'll see it on there. Okay. Hand in the back, I think, and then down to the front. Oh, we're going front and then back. Okay.
Hi, thanks so much for your presentation. I'm Saki Bailey from SFCLT. So we've had a lot of experience working with small sites. So in a way, I feel like this is kind of comparable to some of the problems we might have seen in using COPA and small sites. Is there a tenant income certification requirement? Like at what point, are there annual reporting like cycles? I mean, what does that look like? Because I'm, in thinking about these properties, it's not necessarily that we have to organize the tenants to acquire the buildings in the first place, although that is a really good source probably of finding these properties. But then eventually, if we need to income certify every single tenant, that means we need full cooperation. So we probably want to know that from the outset, like how cooperative the tenants are. So just trying to understand that piece.
yeah, that's a great question. Do you know off the top of your head? I have a kind of an answer.
In terms of income certification. So yeah, I think it's designed to so you'll be doing your projections and you'll be guessing, but I think there will be estoppels, right, as part of the closing process. So we'll need to kind of set everything up as we close.
I just can't remember what's in the guidelines.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I think the answer is probably at some point. The long-term compliance is about ensuring the affordability compliance is met through the 55 years. And we've talked about how we as LISC will be managing that for 55 years. So I don't have a good answer right now, but I wrote that down because I think it's a really important question to answer sooner rather than later. Yeah.
And also just for the COSER, right? So if you'll need to know if you think your property might need the COSER, you'll need to know that it's, I think, 50 and under, right? 50% AMI and under, right? In the back corner.
Hey, Sandra McNeil. A question for you, Elizabeth. You mentioned that it's going to be first come, first serve, or one of you did. And, I fully expect this is going to be horribly oversubscribed. And, I'm particularly concerned about Southern California, where we have half the population of the state living below Wilshire Boulevard. And we're talking about 45% of the money for, from Kern all the way down. If it's really first come, first serve, I know you have the pre-qualification process and hopefully you're weeding out any bad actors, but it could really put, smaller organizations at a disadvantage to more equipped organizations that maybe line up a whole series of acquisitions to run through immediately. And I'm just wondering what flexibility you might build in that allows another layer of assessment from the fund managers to be able to kind of balance out a set of priorities to ensure, geographic spread, ensure that there's a diversity of organizations, or that the CLTs who have fought so hard for this are able to be well positioned in this process.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking that question. I don't know what that process looks like just yet, but it's been top of mind for us. And I think one thing that will kind of force us to do that, frankly, is that the state will be dispersing the money in chunks. So we'll get 100 million at a time, and then we have to commit, I think, at least 75% of it before we could request the next chunk. And we'll have to be doing reporting to the state. And, as much of that is that we can share publicly, I think we should also be able to try to share that publicly, both kind of the geographical breakdown, the type of organizations receiving funding, and then, be able to shift our targets as need be. I also think outreach and making sure that we're really not outreach, I sent you a flyer, but really truly getting to know folks in communities that like aren't accessing the dollars, like really knowing like, okay, like, are you 6 months away from like being able to like submit an application, like so that we can be tracking that, I think is going to be really important too. So I'm excited to kind of think more about what that kind of tracking and like strategic decision making looks like, so that we're able to, get projects funded quickly. We need to show that once we're finally able to do that. And like, to your point, really making sure that we're living up to the kind of dreams and values of the program.
How much more time do we have? Do you happen to know? I think I know there was a delay. Sorry? Done? Okay. Okay. Perfect. Perfect answer. So last moment here, we're just gonna bring it back to stay tuned for more explicit calls to action from this network, the California CLT network, over the coming months about how you can begin to engage in the budget process for this next cycle that will start in January. It will likely involve, requests to call folks, submit letters if you can. We're starting to gather a list of projects that would be eligible for FIHPP that are already happening. And so if you are working on a project that would be FIHPP eligible before FIHPP funding is available, please let us know so that we can build that list. Stay tuned for more, and please, please, please build into your policy agendas for this year some engagement around the FIHPP budget and keeping these dollars allocated to this program. So I'm just going to go for final wrap up comments from our panelists here today. Ruby, do you have any final words of wisdom?
I don't, but I appreciate the time here today and look forward to connecting with you all. And if there's more that you want to talk through about the TA program, feel free to catch me after this.
And are you rharris@enterprise.org?
Yes, I am.
rharris@enterprise.org.
Yeah, and I think I'll check, but I think my contact information is in the app too.
Yeah, same. I'm just really excited to like work with this group of folks and the network on this program. So same, email me, get in touch if you
Yeah, we'll hang out for a little bit. Come say hi.